Hello and welcome back to America's Forum here on Newsmax TV. I'm John Bachman. What do President Obama, James Clapper, and the NSA director have in common? They're all being sued in an NSA class action spying lawsuit. FreedomWorks President Matt Kibbe is joining with Rand Paul and lead counsel Ken Cuccinelli, the former Attorney General of Virginia, on the steps of the D.C. Court District to file paperwork against the group for the NSA spying program. FreedomWorks announced that they are prepared to take the case all the way to the Supreme Court and that they are committed to raising awareness on the important issue of civil liberties protected under the Fourth Amendment of the United States Constitution. Joining you right now to talk about all of this is the man at the helm of FreedomWorks, President Matt Kibbe. Matt, thanks for being here.
Hey, thanks for having me.
All right, talk about your lawsuit with us. What's the latest update, and why is this such an important fight?
So yesterday we filed, and we're in a wait-and-see mode as the process starts to gear up. But I think, the reason we got involved was first of all, the Fourth Amendment is something that needs to be protected. It needs to be reestablished. We need to put the federal government back in its box because they've clearly crossed the line. The other half of that is we're a perfect representative of a broader class with our 6 million plus members, all of whom own a cell phone, all of whom have made phone calls. And that's what this case is really about. The federal government and the NSA and the Obama administration have been harvesting your metadata, my metadata, in a way that fundamentally violates the Fourth Amendment protections to privacy and to undue search and seizure.
All right, so let's say that the lawsuit is successful here. I'm going to play devil's advocate from some of the folks in the security infrastructure in our country. They'll say if they don't have this information and there is some sort of terror attack, that it will be unacceptable to the American people. What do you say to those folks?
Well, they themselves have said that this is an ineffective and inefficient way of gathering data on actual wrongdoing, on actual criminals. There's no evidence that this has worked to stop a single crime by a single individual, and that's the bottom line. In terms of our Fourth Amendment rights, it's wrong. In terms of its actual use, it's not that useful.
Another, again, playing devil's advocate, another thing you hear from people who kind of are aghast by this lawsuit here, saying, look, this is something that maybe we shouldn't be talking about in such a public way, let alone this is probably just a political ploy by Rand Paul and groups like FreedomWorks.
Well, I don't consider this political at all. I wouldn't be involved if I didn't think that we could win. And we have always argued that on questions of civil liberties, this is not about Republican versus Democrat. This isn't even about conservative versus liberal. Every American should be shocked and appalled that any government, whether it be the Obama government or the Bush government, is trampling on their basic civil liberties. And we think this is one of those places where we can stand shoulder to shoulder with the ACLU, with progressives, as well as with conservatives, with Tea Partiers, with constitutionalists.
Yeah, and this is definitely not an issue that cuts down political lines. Another thing that you can take a certain stance on this and say, look, Matt, we're getting a chance to talk about things like you just said, that this information, we don't have a lot of good information that's been tied to any real arrests in the terror field. If we're talking about this stuff, if it brings more awareness to and the discussion becomes more prevalent in American society, is that still considered a win for you regardless of the outcome of the actual lawsuit?
Oh, I think so. I think this is all about educating the public. It's all about reestablishing an across-the-board understanding of what our basic Bill of Rights, what's guaranteed to us under our system of government. That's what this is all about. And it's important to understand that in our philosophy, the rule of law matters a lot. We don't give unchecked discretionary power to anybody, Republican or Democrat, some faceless bureaucrat at NSA. They're accountable to us, and we need to reestablish that principle because this is the slippery slope that leads to abuse of power.
Yeah, it's certainly, that is an easy case to make, and you do it so well. Another issue that's kind of along these same lines, Matt, but in a little bit different direction. Again, this week we heard the White House being asked about the possible targeting of American citizens on foreign soil by drones without a due process of law. This was an issue, of course, with Nouri al-Maliki, something that we've talked about. We've also heard the president defend this practice, saying it's approved by members of Congress. What's your take that we're still talking about this, even though the president was supposed to definitively address this in a speech he made a while back last year?
You know, it's fascinating to watch the evolution of this administration's positions on what they have done and not done, because it changes all the time. The story continues to evolve as they get caught with their hands in the cookie jar. And I think we still don't know the truth, and we're still struggling to get answers. What the president has said so far is utterly unsatisfactory. It has not cleared up anything.
Yeah, and again, obviously there's an appetite in the media to find out more about this very controversial program, and a clear example, as some folks would say, of the administration going around the Constitution. Another topic, Matt, to talk about with you is what happened in the Senate last night. There was some maneuvering. Would you say this was a win for grassroots groups like yourself, kind of having some folks hold the line and isolating, I guess you could say, a guy like Mitch McConnell on this vote?
Well, there's emerging a broader freedom caucus in the House and the Senate, Republican GOP, and you see that dividing line. And I think it's important that people understand that it was Republicans who ran in 2010, including the Republican leadership, that made certain promises to the American people. And they have backed away from those promises now in sort of a stark way, where they're just rubber stamping an increase in the debt ceiling. That's a loss for all Americans, but it's also drawing a line in the sand between those who come to Washington and do what they said they were going to do. Let's suggest Ted Cruz is one of those guys, and guys like Mitch McConnell, who have talked a good game but have never acted the way they promised that they would.
And that is one of the reasons why Steve Stockman is running against John Cornyn in Texas. But do you feel like if Steve Stockman were to win, that he would be more effective in the Senate than John Cornyn?
Well, we're waiting to see. I mean, from a FreedomWorks perspective, we're waiting to see how that primary works out, because there's other challengers to John Cornyn as well. It's similar to what's going on with Lindsey Graham in South Carolina.
Yeah, exactly.
These
guys. John Cornyn in particular has a pretty strong conservative rating.
I would dispute that. I think on things that really matter, like the TARP bailout, like the expansion of Medicare, like defunding Obamacare, he's not there. And I've noticed a pattern over the years. There's a lot of conservatives that talk the talk, but on those few votes that really, really matter, John Cornyn hasn't been there.
That's an interesting take. We want to hear from you guys about all of this stuff. Matt, thanks so much for being with us. It's been a pleasure talking with you about this. These are very important questions, and one that really kind of get to the root of what Americans care about. This issue with the freedom of the press, the Fourth Amendment, the constitutional issues, and also things like drones, and what the makeup of our U.S. Senate is going to be after 2014. Matt Kibbe, thanks so much for being with us.
Okay, thanks for having me.
All right. Of course, we do want to hear from you on social media. You can weigh in, participate in our discussion. You can contact me directly at johnb_Newsmax. Also, all of us here at Newsmax TV at newsmaxtv.com, and email us at connect@newsmaxtv.com. And you can find us on Facebook at facebook.com/Newsmax. Guys, we have a lot more to get to here later on the show. We're going to bring David Patton back in to talk to us more about what's happening in politics, and also we're keeping a close eye on what's happening along the eastern seaboard. Hundreds of thousands of Americans dealing with no heat, no power. The storm hitting the south all the way up to New England. More on that when we continue right after this.